Thank you, Rick, for that lovely introduction. So, yes, life, as Rick has pointed out, abounds with decisions, big and small. Things like, should I book a skiing holiday in New Zealand, or should I not have? Things like, should I try and put on an enormous science and arts festival in the middle of a pandemic? Or simple decisions like, should I eat that Lamington, or should I, have some willpower and avoid it? And every time we make a decision, we're essentially making a gamble on how the future will turn out. If the Earth gets hit by an asteroid tomorrow and we're all destroyed, should you have eaten the Lamington? Yes, you should have eaten the Lamington. If we survive as humanity to summer and you have to show off your beach body, should you have eaten the Lamington? No. So, decisions are a gamble against the future. So tonight what I hope to do is just give you a little bit of an idea about how maybe maths can help us make some of these decisions. So let's start with an easy one. You are a carving woman who've just purchased yourself a new dishwasher, and the smell of links is wafting from the checkout counter. Would you like to purchase the extended warranty with this dishwasher? It's only $300 more, and if it breaks down between 2 and 5 years, you'll have the security of knowing you're protected.
How should we think about a decision like this? So it's pretty simple. We either get the warranty or we don't. So what are the ingredients in this decision? Basically, there's 3 things we need to consider. How much does the warranty cost? How much would a new dishwasher cost? And what is the probability that the dishwasher breaks down in the warranty period? And so mathematically, we can represent this in 2 very simple formula. What's the expected cost of getting the warranty? This is a super simple equation that even Rick will like. It's just W. It's just whatever the warranty costs. If you get the warranty, at that point it doesn't matter if your dishwasher breaks down or not. What is the expected cost of not getting the warranty? It's P times D is the expected value of the expected cost of not getting the warranty. So do we need to do this calculation? We don't. Do you know why we don't need to do this calculation? Someone has done it for us, and do you know who that someone is? It's the man who smells of links. Well, no, he's just their representative. The person who is selling you the warranty has already done this calculation, and they know how often dishwashers break down, and they carefully pick the number W so that it will always be bigger than P times D. So it's just like going to the casino. You know on average that you're going to lose. So expected value says you should not buy the warranty. So I never get the warranty. Okay, so far so good. Let's have a similar looking decision. Should you insure your house? What are the ingredients for this decision? Just pretty similar to last time. It's basically how much does it cost to insure the house? How much would it cost to buy a new house if your house burnt down? And what's the probability that your house burns down in the insurance period? We'll carry on. So our maths here is much the same, but we're going to add one little extra bit to this slide. And think about this expected value on the right here, the expected cost of not getting insurance. So it's just P times H, so the probability that house burns down times cost of replacing house. But I've added back in this 1 minus P times 0. So to emphasize the fact that you never will actually pay P times H. You never actually pay the expected cost. You'll either pay 0 when your house doesn't burn down, or you'll pay H, the whole cost of replacing your house. And so even though the maths here is exactly the same, an expected value tells you, don't insure your house. It's ridiculous. On average, you're losing money. Are you still going to insure your house? Yes, you are. You should. This is a case where we should ignore expected value because we can't afford for the bad thing to happen. So we have to try and control the variance. So the moral of this bit of the story really is if you can afford the bad outcome, you might not like it, but you can afford it, then don't buy insurance for it because you're going to lose on average. But if you can't afford the bad outcome, then you better get insurance. All right. So let's try a more difficult decision. This is one I was faced with about 10 weeks ago, and I think it's probably one a lot of people around Australia have been thinking about. Should I get an AstraZeneca vaccine now, if one is available, or should I wait for the government to be organised enough to provide me with a slightly safer Pfizer vaccine? So you can have lots of goals in life, love, happiness, whatever. I have one simple goal around this decision: avoid becoming dead, okay? There's all these ads on television at the moment about vaccines. I got the vaccine because I wanted to protect the elderly, or I care about my community. That's really lovely. I just want to find the decision that gives me the lowest probability of becoming dead. Just selfish, just looking out for number one. So, what are the ingredients involved in this decision? So basically there's 4 as I can see it. What's the probability, if you do decide to get the AstraZeneca vaccine, that you get a blood clot? And then given that you do, what's the probability that it's fatal? So that's sort of a one side of the equation. And then on the other side, and the let's wait for a better vaccine decision, what's the probability that I catch COVID in the next 90 days, or however long it is until a Pfizer vaccine becomes available, and what's the probability that it kills you? And so you could think about these probabilities for the whole population, but I'm the one making the decision, and so I want to know what's my probability of dying of COVID, or what's my probability of dying of a blood clot. So next bit, so we're going to modify these things just a tiny bit here. I've got this sort of bar and say age. So this is how we represent a conditional probability. So your probability of dying of COVID depends on a number of things. So here, 3 things that it definitely seems to depend on: your age, your sex, and UHCs, underlying health conditions. So exceedingly hypothetically speaking, if you were a 45-year-old woman who was overweight and a bit asthmatic, you'd want to know what's the probability for that, completely hypothetically. Next little bit, please. So let's dig into the maths here. So the sort of decision 1, get the AstraZeneca vaccine. Millions, hundreds of millions of people have had the AstraZeneca vaccine, and we know pretty precisely how many of them have had a blood clot. So this 1 on 30,000, we're very confident about this probability. We can work it out using what's known as the long-run frequency interpretation of probability, which basically just says you do something a lot of times, count how often something happens, divide one by the other, you've got your probability. Our next number here, 1 on 30, the probability of dying of a blood clot. Obviously, we've got a smaller number of people who've had blood clots, but still probably in the thousands of people around the planet. And so we can get a reasonable estimate of this probability. So if we put those 2 ingredients together, we get what's the probability of dying from taking an AstraZeneca vaccine. And it's about 1 in a million, a little bit more. And you might say, oh, that's so low, it's completely safe. But as we've seen, if 6 million people in Australia get the vaccine, 6 of them have died. So it's not trivial to make this decision. So let's think about our other 2 ingredients here, our decision to wait for Pfizer. So next little bit, please. So it turns out that one of these is quite a bit easier than the other. So our 4th one here, the probability that COVID kills you if you catch it, is similarly easy to work out because this long-run frequency of probability applies. Millions of people who are hypothetically 45, female and a bit fat have got COVID, and we know how many of them have died. So it's about 1 in 200. But now we get a little bit stuck. I'm trying to work out this last piece of the puzzle here. What's the probability of catching COVID in the next 90 days? And this is where life gets a bit interesting because the long-run frequency idea doesn't apply here. What would I like to do? I'd like to put Australia through a time machine and run the next 90 days thousands of times and see how many times we get a Delta outbreak and Gladys doesn't close Sydney down fast enough, or how many times we're just lucky and that doesn't happen. But you can't really do that. And so you get a little bit stuck. And so you're left with a bit of guesswork filling in this piece. But what I decided was, well, if that number's something like 1 in 5,000, then it's about a tie, and then maybe we do care about community benefit and I should get the vaccine. So that's what I did about 10 weeks ago. The other thing it led me to think about as I was making this decision is that Donald Rumsfeld, bless him, is very underrated. He's always bagged out for this quote about the known knowns and the known unknowns, but I thought I could come up with a similarly pithy, stupid quote, next bit, so that there are some uncertainties that we can be quite certain about, but there are some uncertainties that are actually just quite uncertain, depending on whether you've got this long-run frequency idea. So Now let's get to the decisions that we make that depend on what other people do. So not just about randomness in the future, but now there's another player out there in this game of life, and they have their own interests, and they maybe don't match your interests. So they're looking out for number one, and you're looking out for number one. So the area of mathematics that describes this is known as game theory. Has anyone seen the movie A Beautiful Mind? A few people? Yeah, about John Nash, and he was one of the mathematicians that invented this area. And there's a famous game that people study called the hawk-dove game. And it's not necessarily that you're actually thinking of actual hawks and doves fighting it out, although that could be fun. You're really just thinking of these as two strategies that you can choose to play. So the hawk strategy is to be aggressive. You meet someone else, you want to get into a rumble, you want to take their land, you want to take their girl, you want it all, okay? Then the dove strategy, you run into someone else that's aggressive, you will run away. You're like, no, take it all, I'm out of here. You don't want to have a fight. And so which strategy is the best to adopt? Well, let's have our next slide. It depends on who you meet. So if you're playing a hawk strategy and you meet another hawk, then you're going to get into a big fight and you're going to be injured. And so that's pretty bad. Or if you're a dove and you meet another dove and you're like, peace out, bro, and you just sit there and you're all happy, you don't get any extra stuff, but you don't get hurt. So that's okay. Or if a hawk meets a dove, then that's great for the hawk. The dove runs away, they get all the spoils, and it's pretty bad for the dove. And so we can summarise all of these outcomes in what's known as a payoff table. And so in the rows here, we've got the decision you might make, and in the columns, the decision the other person might make. And inside the table there, I've got the payoff to you. And so what's the best strategy? What are you going to do? Hands up if you want to be a hawk. Hands up if you want to be a dove. What if I told you that everyone else out there was a hawk? What do you want to do now? Everyone's a hawk. What do you want to be? A hawk. You want to be a hawk? Graham, have you even been listening? Look, everyone else out there is a hawk and you're choosing to be a hawk. You're going to get in a fight. You're going to get injured. You've just had your 80th birthday. You can't afford this kind of thing. Graham's gone and got himself injured. This is not good. If everyone else is out there as a hawk and you know that, well, you can choose to be a hawk and that would be very bad, or you could choose to be a dove and that would only be a bit bad. A bit bad is better than very bad. So if everyone else is a hawk, you should be a dove. Okay, next question. You think everyone else is a dove, what should you be? Scared to answer now? No? Yeah, you should be a hawk. If you think everyone else is a dove, then you'd like to be a hawk because, great is better than just okay. And so this is one where to make a sort of mathematical decision here, we need to know what are the proportion of hawks and doves around in order to be able to successfully do that. Now, John Nash came up with this theory and he won a Nobel Prize for it in economics. And the idea was that it would describe rational behaviour by humans. It turns out humans actually don't behave very rationally, and game theory maybe hasn't been enormously successful at describing humans. But what it has been quite good at is describing evolutionary biology, because selection and fitness kind of do just automatically act rationally. If you're passing on your genes to the next generation, you can't kind of quibble about things. And so this paper here came out around about when I was doing my undergraduate degree, I think, and it captured my imagination. Because it's about this species of lizards. Now these lizards have 3 different colour morphs. They're orange-throated lizards, and these are aggressive. These are the macho men of the lizard world. They want all the girls and all the territory, and they'll be aggressive to keep it. Then we have the yellow-throated lizards. Now the yellow-throated lizards look like the female lizards, and so what they do is they sneak into the territory of the orange-throated lizards, looking like just another woman lizard, and then they have a sneaky copulate. So this is known as the sneaky fucker strategy. Okay? Then we have the blue-throated lizards, and so they just like one mate, one girlfriend, but they guard her closely. And so what scientists discovered as they watched this population over many years was that essentially these lizards are playing an endless game of rock, paper, scissors. So if you have all if the orange-throated lizards predominate, then the yellow ones start to build and take over. But when the yellow ones predominate, the blue type start to take over. When the blue type predominate, the orange type can take over. So we have this sort of endless cycle. So now I've got my probably last, don't go to the next slide yet. Wait, I said wait, go back, wait. Oh, man. Okay, can anyone think of an application of game theory to pandemic times? You've already seen it. I was hoping someone would say something like, you know, if we think no one else is vaccinated, it's more important that we do, or something like, and I was going to say, no, there's a much more important decision that faces us all. Next slide, please. To stockpile or not to stockpile of the toilet paper. Let's think about this decision. So you can stockpile or not, other people can stockpile or not. So first case here, you stockpile toilet paper, so does everyone else. That's bad, right? Australia is sort of the laughing stock of other countries. Everyone feels a bit dumb, okay? Next, you stockpile toilet paper, no one else does. That's also a bit bad for you, maybe even a bit more bad than the last outcome, because people look at you like this as you walk down the supermarket checkout aisle and you feel like a bit of a moron. So that's bad. But next option, you don't stockpile toilet paper, no one else does. That's fine, life continues as normal. Next option. Yes. You decide that you're a rational person living in a first world country and it's ridiculous to stockpile toilet paper. But everyone else, they stockpile the toilet paper. That's really, really bad. And so what would John Nash make of this decision? What does game theory tell us to do? So assuming we think the rest of the population are non-stockpilers, what should we do? We don't stockpile either. What if we're worried? Look to the person at your left. Look to the person at your right. Can you trust them? Do you think they might be heading to the supermarket right after this talk? So the best thing to do depends on how much trust you have in your fellow man. So, okay, I think it's time for me to wrap up. So, next slide, thanks. So, the take-home messages for this talk. Number one, never get the extended warranty. Similarly, if you're getting a rental car and they want to upsell you on the lowering the excess, don't do any of that. Take the money you would have spent, put it in a little bank account, and you'll be ahead on average. Next point. But do always insure your house unless someone stupidly rich is in the audience and you can afford it if it burns down. Then maybe you don't need to. Get vaccinated. I should say this is not really little disclaimer at the bottom. I'm in no way qualified to give you this advice. I'm not in any way medical. But I do earnestly believe that if you get vaccinated, you'll almost certainly reduce your probability of dying. But one thing I know for sure is that you'll reduce my probability of dying, because you'll be less likely to give it to me. So go get a vaccine. It would make me really happy. And last but not least, the only time it's rational to stockpile toilet paper is if you live in a country where everyone is irrational enough to stockpile toilet paper.